Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another video with On Point Politics. Make sure to hit the like button, to subscribe to the channel, and to hit the notification bell so you don't miss another video just like this. We're going to be covering the latest data on all of the governorships for 2025 and 2026 and actually show why Republicans may be positioned to be in the driver's seat after the 2026 elections. Now, looking at this map, so these are the two governorships that are up this year, which we are currently fundraising money for these polls. I will leave links in the description down below if you guys want to fundraise or help support the cause to raise money for both Virginia and New Jersey polling. Those will be in the description down below if you so choose to donate. Now, looking at the state of Virginia, this was a state that back all the way in 2021 voted for Glenn Youngkin by a tilt margin of just about 1.9%. Okay, so he won it by a tilt margin. It was somewhat close. McAuliffe was actually expected to win this race fairly easily. If we actually look at the Wikipedia page, you'll see that Glenn Youngkin got about 50.6% of the vote, and Terry McAuliffe got about 48.6%. So roughly almost a 2-point win. It's like right below the 2-point threshold, okay? And the turnout was actually up from the last election. And if we go down to the polling, what you'll notice, which is very fascinating, you'll actually see, if we look at the general election polling, you're going to see that the race was actually expected to go in McAuliffe's favor for quite some time. I mean, like, the polling was always like somewhat close, but you saw that it was relatively closer. But at one point, McAuliffe did open up like a decent lead, in the middle. He kind of was doing okay. He had like a 6-point lead, 7-point lead, 4-point lead. And then after the debate where McAuliffe said, oh, parents shouldn't be able to decide for their kids' education, is when things started kind of taking a turn for the worse. And you really see that Terry McAuliffe was leading a lot of these polling, leading a lot of these. And even like Fox News had McAuliffe winning by 11 in October, which is like a really bad miss, actually. But we see, like, then Monmouth put out a poll where you had the likely voter screen had him up by 3 points, which is interesting. And then you saw KA Consulting had him up like 2, which is fairly decent. Coefficient had him up 2. Senegal had it tied. We see Suffolk University had it really close. So, like, as the election came closer and closer, we saw that it was definitely a lot more of a closer race, and Youngkin kind of took the lead at the very end, to the point where even, like, Research Co. actually had like probably the best poll out of everybody. And Trafalgar actually had a really good poll for that race, including Insider Advantage. So you see that, like, Glenn Youngkin kind of picked up support towards the end. So it's not too late, although it is already August. So we are already kind of going into the cycle quite a bit. But now the Republican candidate is a lot weaker than Youngkin was. Abigail Spanberger, although is a lot more liberal than even Terry McAuliffe is a lot more of a likable candidate for the Democrats. And so you could see here, like, literally, she has about 4 million cash on hand. And you see that Abigail Spanberger has about 11 million cash on hand. So Abigail Spanberger definitely has a lot more of a primary to go out there. Definitely had a lot more of a primary, or definitely you could say Abigail Spanberger has a lot more of a fundraising advantage. And we even see Winsome Sears in like some general election primary polling actually did pretty okay for the most part. I mean, she would have won the primary relatively easily, as what it seems like. Even Abigail Spanberger seemed like it was gonna be an easy primary for her anyway. So both of them were expected to win this race pretty easily. And we see a lot of the classifications, okay? And a lot of the classifications from earlier during the year are a lot more competitive. But as of recent, especially like State Navigate, August 15th, it is a solid D race here, which is very fascinating. And you look at the polling this time, and it's a lot worse. It's definitely a lot worse. For whatever reason, Abigail Spanberger against Jason Marias did way better in 2024 polling, and then Winsome Sears against Bobby Scott does much better, which is really weird. I don't know how that was the case, but it is definitely interesting to see that. But you saw like Coefficient R had it really, like, this was back in 2023, like 2 years before the election. So that's why they had like 47% undecided. Research America Inc. had it tied in September. Then by December, you saw Spanberger kind of building up a little bit of a single-digit lead. And then lately, she's been building up a much more convincing lead, although there are still a lot of undecideds left. So the race isn't over, but Roanoke College, for example, is putting out like really bad polling that's skewing the aggregate a lot because it just has like a lot of undecideds. I may even build a aggregate for this just to like using my old modeling from before, like my old aggregates from 2024. I may actually build an aggregate to see where the race is right now, because that would be pretty interesting to look at. But if I had to kind of guess, I would say this race is a likely race. I'd say Spanberger probably wins by 6 to 7 points. I don't think Winsome Sears is going to lose by 15, but I definitely don't think she's going to lose by, I don't think she's going to really get close to winning. I think she loses the race by 6 or 7 points. And then in New Jersey, this is really interesting. I have a really hot take about this. I think that Jack Citarelli probably does end up flipping this one. And, in the last election, right, you saw in New Jersey, Murphy won the race by about 3 points in a race where they didn't really spend any money on it. There really wasn't a lot of contention for it whatsoever. And you see that he's doing significantly better. Jack Citarelli did much better in the primary in terms of raw votes that he got, and the Republicans turned out more. And the Democrat field was very split. And you have Scott Presler in Early Vote Action doing a lot of work in New Jersey, registering voters, and the registration for Republicans continues to gain there. And Jack Citarelli's even going to urban areas, campaigning there. Phil Murphy isn't that popular. Mikey Shirley just got elected or got endorsed by Zoran Mandami from New York. So combining all of these things, all these factors, and the fact that he got really close last time, despite not a lot of attention on the race, I actually would characterize it as a very narrow flip. So we're basically trading Virginia for New Jersey. So I do actually think that he narrowly ends up pulling it off. If we look at the polling right now for the race, there isn't a lot of polling as of now that we can really look at per se. Like, there isn't that much polling, but we do see a lot of the forecasts do have it as like a lean D race. Race at White House has a likely D, but I don't think that's going to be the case. Again, still a lot of undecideds. He is polling better than he was at this point. Like in 2021, he's polling better now than when he was polling back then. So definitely he is still in this race. Again, it is favored for the Democrat to win it, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up getting within a couple points and he kind of continues to stretch during the campaign. And I think he may ultimately end up like ever so slightly eking it out in New Jersey. I think he's going to narrowly end up picking off that state. Looking at the other governorships, clearly there are a lot of safe blue states. I think Oregon is probably going to be in that safe column, as well as Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska. I think Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, those are all going to be safe. South Carolina, I believe, is going to be safe. I also think Alaska probably ends up there unless Mary Patola runs. And I think if she does run, it'll probably be like a 7 or 8 point win for the Republican. So I'm going to leave it there. I think for, Jared Polis in Colorado, I do suspect it to be a pretty blue election there. I also believe that in Massachusetts, Maryland, you have safe races. You also have Connecticut as a pretty safe race. Vermont is going to be in the safe Republican column. They have a very liberal Republican governor that they keep reelecting like every single year. And for whatever reason, they have their elections every 2 years instead of every 4 years. So that's why Vermont and New Hampshire are up on the ballot again. And in that case, that pretty much sums up all of the safe states. on either side. I have an interesting prediction about California. I would say Florida probably is over 12 points. I could see that being the case. He'd probably win it. Byron Donalds probably wins it by 13 or 14. I don't think he does as good as DeSantis, but I think he does win it by 13 or 14 points. Greg Abbott, if he is running again, I don't know if he's term limited or not. Maybe he does end up winning by a pretty decent amount there, by over 12. I could see him winning it by 14 or 15 this time, especially given the redistricting effort really backfiring on Democrats. I think that wasn't really the best move for them to take. And so I think that is going to affect the race. And I think that he may actually end up doing better as a result of it. And then now, I mean, looking at Oregon, again, I kind of just realized something. It technically is a little bit closer to the gubernatorial level, but as of right now, there is no like super big third party, and the Democrat won last time. So I'd say it's probably like over 6 points, but within 12. So a 6 to 12 point margin for the Democrat. I think that's probably what you're going to see. Now in California, I actually think the race will be within 12 points. I think you probably see the Democrat win by 10 in California. I think the Republicans will have a lot more effort there. Voter ID may possibly get passed in the state. And so because of all of these factors, including Gavin Newsom being very unpopular in the state, I actually would not be surprised to see that race end up getting significantly closer in 2026. I think you probably see it as a 10-point win for the Democrat right now. And in Nevada, I think you probably have a likely margin there. I think Lombardo is relatively popular there. I think he wins by, maybe 8 points in the state right now. And incumbent governors in Nevada always end up performing well in their reelection bids. So I wouldn't necessarily be too surprised to see that happen there. And I even think in New Mexico, a pretty decent win for the Democrat, I'd expect. Ron Chetty ran for the gubernatorial election in 2022 and got it within 6 points, which was a decent performance given Colorado voting for Polis by 19, which I think he may not be allowed to run for re-election, but I still think it's going to be a safe state either way I still think it's going to be a safe margin regardless for the Democrat. So that doesn't really matter. The margin in New Mexico was relatively good considering how the rest of the states voted. It was pretty decent. So I'd say maybe an 8 or 9 point win for the Democrat nominee in New Mexico is what I would expect. I would say in Minnesota, it's a little bit iffy, but I would say it could be under 6. I think Walz probably wins by 5 points in Minnesota. I think he underperforms his 2022 bid, given the fact that he was the vice presidential candidate and he lost, and it was just kind of embarrassing. So I think that because of his weakened brand, I think that you may actually see him win by less in 2022 or 2026. In Kansas, what's really interesting about that one is this race was a Democrat-leaning race back then. And even in 2018, a Democrat narrowly won that election, very narrowly won that race there. And so because of that, I'd say that it's possible, now given the fact that incumbent is pretty much term limited, I think you're probably going to see Kansas flip by maybe 6 to 8 points for the Republican nominee. I don't think it's going to be a layup for Republicans just yet. It could be a safe margin, depending on how the race goes. It could be safe, but again, not exactly too sure about that as of right now. I'm not 100% too bullish on the results. And Walz did underperform his 2018 performance in 2022. I just looked it up. He actually did worse in 2022 than he did in 2026. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up doing significantly worse there. I would honestly not really be that surprised if that was the case. Looking at these other races, I think in the state of New York, I would say it's probably it's kind of a lean Democrat race as of right now. I would say it's probably going to be, it was a 6-point win last time for Hochul. I would say she wins it by maybe 2 to 3, given Mondami's victory in New York City. I think that's going to shift the stayed away from her a bit, but I still think she'll win just by enough to like narrowly hold on in New York as of right now. Rhode Island, I think the race will be a little bit closer. I know that the governor there is very unpopular. The incumbent is like underwater in Rhode Island. So just for that alone, I would say it's a likely margin. New Hampshire, I think Kelly Ayotte wins fairly easily. And in Maine, the Democrat would win fairly easily, probably by like 10 points in Maine. And then in Illinois, I think J.B. Pritzker only wins his race by 8 or 9. The Republicans are putting up a fairly strong candidate there. So I think you may actually end up getting a pretty decent race out of there. So I wouldn't exactly be that surprised if the race was really that close. And the Republican candidate in Iowa probably ends up winning by like 11 points, maybe 12. You could say the race is safe, to be honest with you. I don't really see why it wouldn't be. And then in Georgia, I would say the Republicans just naturally at the gubernatorial level are a lot more capable of winning the elections like fairly easily. So I'd say that Kemp obviously did very well in Georgia in 2022, but I think that because of him not running anymore and the fact that you have a new set of candidates, if they run against Stacey Abrams again, you may end up seeing the Republican win by like 2 to 3 points in the state. Arizona, I actually suspect that the Republican candidate, Andy Biggs, probably defeats Katie Hobbs by about 2 points. I think Katie Hobbs is relatively unpopular in the state. A lot of people don't like her there. And I think Andy Biggs is a significantly stronger candidate for a state like Arizona. And Charlie Kirk there is pushing a lot of work with the Turning Point action groups to be able to help out Andy Biggs there. So I think Charlie Kirk's Turning Point alone is actually going to end up giving Andy Biggs the race there. So he probably ends up winning it by 2 points. I think the Republican wins the race in Georgia by 3. And that leaves us the Rust Belt states. And the Rust Belt states are going to be very interesting. It's going to be very interesting to look at these. Michigan is going to go lean Republican as of right now. That's my characterization for the race. And for Michigan, the reason why I say that is because if we actually look at the race, right, if we look at what is going on for the 2026 race, what you'll notice is there is a candidate by the name of Mike Duggan as an independent, and he is the current mayor of Detroit. And so and if you look at the polling of the race, he is pulling in a pretty significant amount of the vote. I mean, if you look at Jocelyn versus John James, like she's only ahead by like a point, with Duggan getting 22%, 21%. And he's actually been building ground throughout the year. Like since they pulled this, he's actually gained steam. And I think that he's going to take away a lot of votes from the Democrat candidate, more than they're even trying to say here. You see John James against like a Mike Duggins and Chris Swanson. John James wins fairly easily in the election. He wins by like 5 points. Like he's doing fairly well. So I think just because of this alone, because Mike Duggan's in the race and because John James is probably going to win the election, in my opinion, the primary, just because of that alone, if we actually look, he's winning the primary polling relatively easily here. He is a fairly strong candidate, and I think because of that and the fact that you have the independent, I think you are going to see him narrowly probably take it by, I'd say he wins it by 3. That's probably where he wins it by right now. In Wisconsin, you have Tony Evers retiring. Again, not a popular governor in the state of Wisconsin. And the Republicans may field, you may see Eric Hovde actually run for governor in the state. It's possible that you actually see him run for governor there. So I think in a race where Eric is running against a non-incumbent, it was really close last time, I could see him like narrowly picking it off this time, but maybe it goes tilt Dem. I would say this one's like a pure toss-up, but maybe for the sake of the video, I'll probably just put it tilt Republican. And we have the last 2 states, Ohio and Pennsylvania. And the reason why I have not filled out Ohio is because Vivek Ramaswamy is not a top-tier election candidate, guys. He is not going to perform well on the general election. Primary voters, he'll do very well with, in my opinion. I think he'll do fairly well with them. But with Vivek Ramaswamy, looking at this, he's easily winning the primary, like very easily winning. Even before he announced his candidacy, he was already beating Dave Yost by a pretty big margin, and he currently is again right now. So it's a very, in earlier ratings, you saw that it was like a pretty safe rating, but like now Race to the White House has it really close. And we have a few bit of polling, but we see that like Vivek Ramaswamy is up 1 in this poll. He's up 5 in a YouGov poll. He's down in this poll. And you see with Tim Ryan, he's up by a couple points. He's up in like the Democrat internal by a couple points, which he's up by a couple points. So I'd say, given the fact that there is a subsection of voters in the state of Ohio that wouldn't vote for Vivek Ramaswamy, I actually think it's going to be a very close gubernatorial election. I would say Vivek wins it by 1 or 2 points, but it's basically a tilt state. It's very, very close. Pennsylvania, this is the one I wanted to save for last because this one is a very interesting one. For the state of Pennsylvania, you have Stacey Garrity running for governor, who is the Republican treasurer of the state as of right now. And the reason why this is like such a big deal, okay, the reason why this is such a big deal for Pennsylvania is because if we look at the results from 2020, okay? So let's actually start at 2016. This guy, Joe, okay, which I don't even know. He looks kind of funny looking, but he won by 6 points in 2016, okay? He won by 6 points in 2016 when Trump won the ballot against this like no-name candidate, right? So you saw that, and he basically the Democrat here ended up winning pretty easily. They ran like a no-name Republican in the state. You see, no-name Republican here. And all these older elections, Bob Casey Jr. actually ran for treasurer in 2004 and won fairly easily, which made him a formidable opponent when he then won the Senate somewhat easily in his early elections and then went on to lose. But look at this. Look at Pennsylvania State Treasurer Stacey Garrity, who is from the U.S. Army, beat the incumbent in 2020. Okay, just so you guys understand, Trump lost the state in 2020, and she ended up picking off the election from the incumbent Democrat. So she is a fairly strong candidate. And then in 2024, she went on to win the race by a whopping 6.3% and almost got just as much as votes as Donald Trump got in the state. Like, she almost matched Trump's total votes in the state of Pennsylvania, which is like pretty insane. I mean, let's look. He got about 3.5. She literally got like 1,000 votes less than the president did. And then in 2020, she actually ended up doing like about 100,000 votes worse than the president, or like 80,000 votes worse than the president. But she basically matched the president's vote total in this election. And then the Democrat underperformed. The Democrat ended up underperforming Harris by like 300,000 votes in the state. And you saw she won fairly comfortably. And she has announced her candidacy against Josh Shapiro, who I believe is an overrated 2028 Democrat pick. He has been a somewhat popular governor there, but at the same time, he's been very pro-Ukraine. He has had the issue with the farmers. He's had a lot of skeletons in his closet, supposedly. And I think that with a strong Republican candidate, you may see this race end up coming down to like a 3 or 4 point win for Shapiro. I don't think he loses yet, but I think he is at a strong disadvantage with Stacey Garrity being the candidate. And just by the way, I said this at the end of July that Josh Shapiro is not guaranteed his reelection bid. And I actually stated this like before Stacey Garrity even announced she was running for governor, or even hinted at the fact she was. And so that's pretty much it for this video, guys. The Republicans end up picking up Arizona, Kansas, Wisconsin, and Michigan in their gubernatorial column. And we also end up picking up New Jersey as well. The only governorship we end up net losing Here is Virginia. So they basically end up netting 4 governorships between now and next year. If you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And I will see you guys in the next video.